My name is Luke Bellsmith, and this is my POL presentation. The hydrous magnesium silicate, commonly known as asbestos, has been known about and used in some form or another for thousands of years. It was known as the miracle material. Extremely fireproof, cheap, strong, light, soundproof, and easy to find, it could be turned into a vast array of items. Even thousands of years ago, the ancient Greeks and Romans would astound guests when they took a cloth made with asbestos and put it into a fire and it wouldn't burn. Asbestos can be mined from the ground in any form of a number of materials that just have lots of long, flexible fibers. Kings and cities from empires long past used it, but asbestos really began to boom in popularity around the early 1900s all the way up until almost the 2000s. Asbestos was working wonders. Everything was cheaper, stronger, better, and more safe. Until people started dying. This is the story of the chemical killer called asbestos. When it comes to the building of structures, humanity has faced many of the same challenges over the years. The structure needs to be strong, safe, and ideally cheap. When asbestos was introduced into the commercial world market in the early 1900s, it did indeed solve many of these problems, and even had more uses beyond just construction. Being a fantastic insulator of both heat and sound, asbestos started to make buildings more fireproof, with pipes, roofs, and doors that didn't burn down. They were lightweight and cheap. They also used it in walls to regulate temperature and to make rooms more soundproof. Asbestos cement was invented, and it was cheaper, more durable, and easier to mold than regular cement. Eventually, the usefulness and versatility of asbestos started to extend past the construction market. Asbestos paper mills were created, and cloth and clothing could be made so that it was completely fireproof. It was used in practically everything from lawn furniture to wall paint. It even became the perfect thing to coat children's toys with, so that they were safe and cheap. For many decades, asbestos was the perfect thing to put everywhere, and it did indeed fix many of the problems surrounding building and manufacturing convenience. From the beginning, it seemed like asbestos was too good to be true, and it turned out that it was. Everywhere that asbestos was used, there seemed to be illness and death that followed it. This correlation was first noted about 2,000 years before we knew about it, by a Roman scholar named Flinty, when he wrote that slaves working in asbestos mines seemed to be getting sick and dying. The problem with asbestos was not that it contained a poison or not that it was a carrier of disease, but the problem lay in its physical composition. Part of what makes asbestos so light, strong, and fireproof is the fact that it's made up of millions of long, flexible fibers. These fibers are also the killers of roughly 90,000 people every single year. What happens is that when the asbestos is handled and used, the fibers start to break down and separate from each other and become a whole bunch of particles that float around in the air. They are far too small for us to see or even know that they're there. When airborne, individuals can breathe these fibers in. Since these fibers are so small, they can travel deep into a person's lungs, where they may eventually lodge in lung tissue. Once lodged in the tissue, these fibers can cause several serious diseases, including lung cancer, a scarring of the lung tissue, or cancer in the lung cavity. Around the 1970s, regulation of asbestos began to come into play, and right now, it is banned in many first world countries. Although the allure of cheap, strong, and insulating material still means asbestos is used in a number of third world countries. However, just because it's not being used as a building material right now, does not mean that we're safe from it around here. Because asbestos was such a versatile material, it was used in so many different parts of buildings, that it's impossible to know every place where it was used. And even if we did know where it was, we'd have to tear down almost every building in the country that was made before the 2000s, just to get rid of it all. Asbestos is the number one workplace killer in the world right now, and health experts predict that it will be many decades before we see the effects of asbestos start to fade. Although the danger of asbestos is well known, when it was created, no one had any idea what the effects would be. I don't blame any of the scientists that perfected commercial asbestos products, because they just saw a miracle material and they wanted to use it in the best way possible. However, I think we can use their experience as an example for the future. I do believe that anyone who makes anything should have to take the time to predict the possible negative consequences of what they make, and this very much applies to scientists. Even today, we tend to focus only on the good parts of what an invention can do, and we gloss over the consequences that will ensue if a harmful product is open to the world. If we learn anything from the story of asbestos, it should be that we need to spend more time finding out everything there is to know about what we're making, the good and the bad. If we know the negative things about what we're making, then we can fix them before they do too much harm. I believe that if a scientist or a corporation cuts corners and doesn't delve deep into the product to find the flaws, then they should be held accountable for their oversights. However, in the case of asbestos, I think the scientists were as blindsided as everyone else was. They had no reason to believe asbestos would be dangerous. After all, they'd known about it and known that it has been used for hundreds of years previous to modern construction, with no apparent ill effects. In conclusion, we've seen how asbestos went from a miracle material, used in every way imaginable, to being outlawed in many countries as a killer of thousands. We need to do more to be careful of our treatment in the planet, and of the certain chemicals that can cause destruction. We were put on this earth to discover, learn, and grow and take care of it. If we destroy the earth in our pursuit of knowledge and glory, then we failed at what we were put here to do. Asbestos has done terrible things to many people, but we can still learn from where it fell short. Thank you for listening to my presentation on asbestos.